I think the U.S. strategy right now is pretty clear. It's that you can influence the Russians a lot more when you engage them than when you don't engage them. The relationship with the U.S. means something to the Russians. It's important for them to feel that they are on equal footing with the U.S. It's this, what do I want to call it, not nostalgia for the Cold War period, but a sense of superpowerdom and being the equal superpower with the U.S. This is one of the things that the Russians really, really care about. And when you engage them, when you engage in summitry and arms control negotiations, you're putting something on the table just simply by virtue of doing that. You're putting something on the table that the Russians want, and therefore it gives you leverage, because you can take that, what you put on the table, it can at some point take away. So I think this is part of the rationale behind the reset policy. I think it's a misconception to say that by doing this, you're not paying attention, by focusing on these realist issues with Russia, arms control, bilateral talks, summitry, you're kind of ignoring the so-called idealist issues of human rights and democracy, because I think you're in a much better position to influence Russia on those things when you're engaged with them, when you have a normal, interesting bilateral agenda. You can influence them on the issue. You can help the Garry Kasparovs of the world, if you will, more when you're engaged with Russia. So I think this is one of the underlying philosophies to what the administration is trying to do right now with Moscow. One of their principal goals is, one of their principal preoccupations is the long-term preservation of the current political status quo in Russia. Nothing is more important than that. And if they can achieve that with good relations with the United States, they'll have good relations with the United States. If they can achieve that through a policy of confrontation with the United States, they'll have a policy of confrontation with the United States. The goal is the long-term preservation of the existing political status quo in Russia, so the current ruling elite maintains its power and its privilege. And that's what they want. Russia's economy is completely and totally dependent on energy and commodities. When Russia tends to be strong internationally, when the Soviet Union / Russia looks strong internationally, periods like the 1970s or the past decade before the economic crisis under Putin, it was in periods of high oil prices. And when Russia looks weak, like it did in the 90s, and it's in periods of low energy prices. And they've never been able to break, as much as they like to talk about diversifying the economy and creating a modernization is the new buzzword in Moscow now. It's not, I don't think it's going to happen for a very simple reason. Or let me rephrase that. I don't think it's going to happen unless some fundamental changes take place in Russian political culture. Because when you diversify an economy, you decentralize that economy by definition, right? When you decentralize an economy, you automatically, over time, are going to decentralize political authority. And that's something that's just completely intolerable for the current elite. So in a lot of ways, Russia's economics is hostage to its politics. Because the political elite and the current political culture certainly doesn't want the political system decentralized and diversified in any way, shape, or form. Because like I said at the beginning, the long-term goal of this elite is the long-term preservation of the political status quo. So it makes diversifying the economy away from energy, from commodities exports, very difficult. There was a move among the elite, and it was led by Surkov, to kind of use Stalin and Stalinism and Stalinist symbols in forging a new ideology for today's Russia. This was not universally welcomed, for obvious reasons, because Stalin is it's going to be a controversial figure, right? No matter what. The Orthodox Church most strongly was opposed to this. And Patriarch Kirill was very, very strongly opposed to this. I have heard from my sources, I don't know if this is accurate, I have not verified this, but what I've heard from my sources is that back in the fall, there was a decision made to basically back off on the Stalinism, that it wasn't going to consolidate the society by any stretch of the imagination, but it was just going to continue to bring back old arguments. So it wasn't going to serve its purpose, and a decision was made in the Kremlin elite to pull back from this. Apparently Yuri Lushkov didn't get the memo, or Yuri Lushkov is playing his own game. He's often off the reservation with what the Kremlin elite wants. So he decided to go ahead with this decision or initially decided to go ahead with this decision on Victory Day to display the Stalin posters, and then they backed off it in order. And the final decision was to display them in inconspicuous places, if I'm not mistaken. That was the compromise they reached. But no, there certainly is a move lately away from Stalinism, and the Katyn, the whole issue of Katyn is tied up in this as well. I thought the most remarkable thing about the whole was Putin actually going to Katyn and acknowledging very publicly, together with Donald Tusk, what happened there. This.
You don't think his speech was a little ambiguous, though?
I think it had to be for domestic purposes, but the fact that he gave the speech, I thought, was significant. I think we have a tendency to, when we look at Russia, to see this monolithic, all-powerful state. And this period right now reminds me like no other period of the 1970s. And if you were following scholarship on the Soviet Union in the 1970s, there was much talk of how they were surpassing the United States and surpassing the West, and they were on the march, invading Afghanistan, and you remember the times. If you look inside the black box, though, you saw a system that was crumbling and coming apart at the seams. Again, what did we have in the 1970s that was holding it together? High oil prices, right? High oil prices.
What are some of the signs you see that it is falling apart?
The most dangerous time for any state or any society is not when living standards are falling, but when living standards rise and stop rising. It's what the political scientist Ted Gurr calls the revolution of rising expectations, right? And relative deprivation. You saw for the last decade unprecedented growth for Russia, growth and rising living standards. And people began to expect that this was the norm. Suddenly, with the economic crisis, this stopped. And I think right now we are in one of those periods of relative deprivation. And this is accounting for a lot of the social unrest we're beginning to see. Do I think it's coming apart at the seams? I don't know. I don't know. But I think there's danger, and the elite certainly senses the danger right now. And there's a debate in the elite of how to handle it. Yuri Shevchuk, the lead singer of DDT, recently in Moscow, going on a 10-minute monologue eviscerating the ruling elite. That you would not have seen that 2-3 years ago. You just wouldn't have seen that. You wouldn't have seen the level of open protest against the regime that you're seeing now. And this is telling me a couple of things. It's telling me that discontent in society is bubbling to the surface, and the elite is not sure what to do to deal with it, and they're for the time being letting it happen.